Well, hello again. Hello, our dear Past the Threshold listeners. This is one of your hosts today on Past the Threshold, and I'm super excited because it's 1 year anniversary, and all three of us are back together again. And we're bringing you something really special. One, because all three of us are here today with you. And two, it's because we're going to cover a topic that everyone wants to know about. We're going to talk about a little bit more on relationships. So I will keep it quiet and we'll let the other girls chime in. Come on.
I don't know. This is
Sarah, Amanda.
subject.
Sorry, I'm cracking myself up.
By the way, we're recording this.
We're talking
And
about red flags, and I have a list of red flags.
You got your list. Well, Amanda, let's start talking. So today we're gonna open up with talking about red flags and what to know and what to think about when you are in a relationship. So Amanda, go ahead with your list. Let's hear it.
Okay, are you guys ready for this? Okay,
Maybe.
this is one red flag is whenever they don't want to have sex before marriage.
Ooh.
What?
I think that's a red flag.
What guy doesn't want to have a risk? One doesn't want to have sex before marriage. That either means they're
Don't you-
closet.
Right?
They're
Don't
in
you
the
think there's
closet.
like something to that? That should be a red flag.
Oh my gosh, I did not see this coming.
I like how you twisted it up.
Get it?
She threw a curveball in there.
Oh my gosh. My puns are getting so good lately.
Yeah, this one is gonna have to have a rating, you guys.
I don't know about that one. I feel like there's a lot of guys in high school who were like virgins until they got married, and then they got married at like 19 and they're still like happily married, you know? So like I feel like
They don't
age
know
is a
any
factor
better.
there.
I think that
Yeah.
sometimes people get married and then they think that they can't get out of it because it's like, oh, they've been married for so long, it's comfortable. Maybe they're not happy. Are they really
I don't know anything about
happily
that.
married?
You're looking at me.
Well, I think there's so many people that, they pretend like they're happily married, and it's okay to not be happily married. It's okay.
Yeah, it's not even, I mean, sometimes it's pretending and sometimes it's just denial. Like for me personally, it was more like I felt like it was comfortable and I would just like convince myself like, oh, it's good. Like it'll be fine. We just have to like work at it. And like, because I'm like very psych-minded, obviously, it was always like research. Like this is how you can fix it in 5 love languages and blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, you guys are not in your head. So I feel like we can continue to have this conversation, which I'm sure honestly, that's a red flag in itself, is like when you're constantly researching and looking at ways that you can work on the marriage, but then like you're the only one working on it and like it's only on your end. I feel like that's a huge red flag.
Well, I think that, go ahead, Allie, because I want to hear.
Oh, no, I was just going to go back to that comment you guys made about when you get married really young. So I remember I got married when I was 19 years old, and then my cultural background and my religious background was you stay with that person throughout life. You committed in holy matrimony and you're with them till death do you part. Doesn't matter what kind of BS they put you through. And so I remember having that mentality when I was married that young. And so even when I went to my mom about the domestic violence that was going on at home, it was her answer to me was like, well, that's the man you chose, so you either put up with it or you basically just put up with it.
Wow.
And so but even before that, when I was dating him, I remember thinking and seeing some of the red flags, which were like the constant drinking, the constant going out with his friends, the just manipulative things that he would say, like he would threaten to hurt himself if I left him. And so it was, I could see some of those red flags, but in my head I would make excuses like, no, like I could fix him, or things will get better after we, get married. Or I even remember thinking, having this just immense fear of losing my circle if I broke up with him, because I didn't really have a whole lot of friends before him. He was my first boyfriend, and so his friends were like my circle. So I thought, if I break up with him, then I'm alone. I don't have
Mm,
anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of my excuses. I remember even
yeah.
seeing the red flags and just being like afraid of losing what I thought I belonged to. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It does. And like I can relate to you in the sense that like you make excuses for someone else's behavior. Like in your mind, you're constantly on the fence of like, oh, well, they probably do this because of like X, Y, and Z, or like you're never really like saying like, no, this is a serious concern, and maybe I should step away from this and think more about what's inside of me and like hold me back from moving
Mm-hmm.
on and staying in this relationship, you know. And something we kind of discuss off the podcast was it comes down to self-worth a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that, because like earlier I think that it's great that both of you guys are mentioning like things to look out for in that person, but like I was saying, I kind of think that it comes into like us, because I think that if
Right.
we look into uh, who we are and what is attracting us into this relationship, then we're going to more likely get in another relationship that's very similar. But I'm kind of getting
Mm-hmm.
ahead, so before we head
No,
into that,
no,
like, what are more red flags?
Yeah. No, I think that, the some of the red flags that we're talking about too is whenever it's fear-based, like whenever, somebody in the relationship is making you feel fearful to a point of,
Mm-hmm.
whether if they're saying something or they're threatening you or they're saying, if you don't do this for me, like one red flag, I think that, is a big
Mm-hmm.
deal is the whole, if you don't do this for me, then you're not respecting me and you're not, supporting me. And I think that that's like that guilt. And then also like what you're saying, Sarah, is, sometimes we rationalize, maybe it's because of their past, what they're going through, or maybe this is just their way of communicating. It's really not that big of a deal. Just, give them what they want because that's their love language, or, that's,
Mm-hmm.
that's the way that, makes them happy. And coming down to that self-worth of, it is completely okay, even if you have children with the other person, to have a healthy separation, to be able to separate yourself from that situation and work on yourself. And be like, you know what? I need to find my self-worth. I know that this is like disrespectful. I know that this is not healthy. This is not okay. It's not okay to like treat the other person like that. And our self-worth of being able to separate ourselves from that situation or even that entire household or that relationship is okay for us to do that. I mean, from what I believe anyway, I think that it is okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like that's a red flag when anybody's trying to guilt you
Yeah.
into, doing stuff for them, because if you don't love them or you don't care for them, or,
definitely.
Mm-hmm. Ellie, you look like you want to add something.
No, I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking of what Amanda said and how people do that, And well, I guess what my question here is like, how do you differentiate when someone is like trying to manipulate you, maybe even unintentionally, by telling you things like that? Or how do you know like when you need to adjust something in your persona or your life to make the relationship work?
Mhm.
I think that's something that we all have a hard time identifying, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
For a lot of us that we don't have, or when we don't have a whole lot of knowledge on like who we really are, or we don't stand firm in our values, or we don't really know what they are sometimes, or even the goal and directions we're going towards. When all of that's kind of like hazy, it kind of all gets lost and mixed up. And so if we don't have, I don't know, I guess like a certain set of values and goals and beliefs set in stone, then it's hard for us to differentiate when we're the ones that's supposed to be making adjustments in our own life versus somebody trying to manipulate us into doing something in a relationship that we don't necessarily should be doing.
Yeah, those are some really, really great points. And it is really difficult. I think that when you're in the relationship, it's incredibly hard to realize if you're being manipulated. And oftentimes it stems from being gaslighted.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're gaslighted, I think like a common symptom is like you don't trust yourself because they've kind of convinced you that like you're the problem.
Yeah.
They really take ownership of like their own self, or like it's never like about it's about you, or like, you know, I like it's not the right language. So like oftentimes in a healthy relationship, they'll say, I feel this way when you do X, Y, and Z. Like this is how we can work together to make improvements. Where in like a more manipulative, and like you said, sometimes they don't even know relationship, it's more like you do this, like you're the problem, you always, and like a lot of times they'll say
Mm-hmm.
always, never, versus like sometimes this happens. And I've even caught myself saying always and never in the heat of the moment. So I think we can all be guilty of doing some of these things, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
what's like incredibly problematic is when you're constantly, you'll notice yourself like apologizing for no reason, like you feel like you're a burden to other people, or you almost have like distorted thoughts, like you feel like you're in people's ways, maybe because of something that they've said to make you feel like you're a bother to other people.
Mm-hmm.
If you notice, like Ali, you mentioned something like this, like you don't really have any kind of relationships outside of the relationship, maybe because they've guilted you into not having those relationships, or they're always like, I don't like
Mm-hmm.
you friends, or you shouldn't talk to your mom. Like that's a serious
Mm-hmm.
concern. And then another manipulative behavior that I think a lot of people do but don't realize is not okay, is manipulative, is I don't know if stonewalling is the right word, but like have you guys ever got to argue with someone and then they just stop talking to you?
Oh yeah, my ex used to do that to me all the time. He could go weeks without talking to me.
Weeks, that's insane. You know, I mean, there's an understanding of like, hey, I just need to cool off because I know that I might say something that's hurtful. So let me like have my space so I can think about it. And then there's just like completely ignoring that person intentionally with the intent of like, they, you know, they did something to me, so this is their punishment. So
Yeah.
they're all like serious red flags for sure in a relationship. Amanda, you want to add anything?
No, I think that you know, since we're like talking about red flags, and I think there are sometimes like those fine lines, like how Ellie's saying, is like, how do you determine, you know, to, you know, when to see that it's something within you know, inside, not them, but like within like us, like there's something inside us that we need to work on. And I know you were talking about, Sarah, we had a conversation the other day, and it was just like one of those aha moments whenever we were talking about we attract who we are.
Right.
Right. So if we're in a relationship with a certain person, we've attracted them because that's who we were at the moment we met them, right?
Agreed.
So then what do you do whenever you change and you're no longer that person, but the person you attracted was you back then? Like, how does that, what do you do? Like, how do you figure that out?
Well, why don't we go back a little bit? Gosh, I keep having something in my throat. I think it's like a thing. I don't know. But let's kind of go back because I feel like it's a bit vague and we had a more in-depth conversation of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, fill it in.
So I'll kind of say for me, what was happening with who I was attracting, because I started noticing a pattern of the same types of guys that I was dating. So it kind of went back and it's a lot of the source of a lot of my unhealthy habits is that I grew up in chaos. So for me, chaos was the norm. And that's even though consciously I don't associate chaos with love, subconsciously I was associating chaos with love. So the addiction that I had was with like anxiety and fear. And I always had this thing in my mind, like I always need something to solve to feel like I'm in control. So it's almost like I like the chaos, but then I like having control over the chaos. So when I don't have chaos, because what happened was I broke a lot of those patterns, because I told myself, okay, well, I don't want to have a chaotic lifestyle. So how can I make changes to feel financially secure, to feel like I'm in a safe environment, but there's still that little piece of me in the back of my mind. So even though I consciously healed and put myself in a safe environment, it's like I'm always waiting for the shoe to drop. And part of that looked like always seeking fulfillment and purpose. So I would create chaos to find peace. So for me personally, I tend to attract emotionally unavailable men. And there's always that like need to feel worthy and need to feel loved. So it's like if I would like get breadcrumbs, and then that would like keep me happy for a little bit. And then I would feel like I was like trying to get more worth in those breadcrumbs, So somebody might be saying like, I might be overjoyed because I succeeded at a goal or I did really well, but that person would be like, oh, it's not that important. You didn't do that great. I didn't feel validated in what I was doing. I was always trying to prove myself to someone. So for me, what was happening is when I did get the breadcrumbs, it produced that dopamine, that feel-good chemical that we get so addicted to. So, and that's part of how I love myself, like growing up, because of that chaos. And what happens is that revs up that nervous system. So what I had to do is replace whatever created that dopamine there with something else that was more healthy. And obviously a relationship where you're constantly looking for approval of your spouse, who is also emotionally available, is not healthy. So sometimes we think, okay, well, I got rid of that relationship, now I can move on and have a healthy relationship. But if you don't do the inner work and understand why that relationship, but why you attracted that type of person, then more likely than not, you're going to attract the same type of person. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
That was really good.
Deep shit, guys.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, do you guys feel like eventually, I don't know. I this is really being open, but I love the feeling of peace of not needing another person to fulfill me. Like, I can't even explain how that feels, because I've always been that feeling that you were just explaining, Sarah. Like, I always felt like I needed those breadcrumbs. I needed something from somebody. I don't care where I get it from. I don't care, I just felt like I needed in order to not feel alone. And now that I just feel so good being alone, being by myself, like I can go anywhere by myself and feel totally comfortable and confident and not feel like I need that other person in my life or in my surroundings to get that validation or get that anything. And that is one of the most amazing feelings I've ever had in my entire life. I just wish I could have had it when I was 18, 19 years old.
Preach. Yeah. Allie, you're on mute.
I can see her.
Like chatting away, and we're like, uh-huh.
Unmute now. And then there was sound. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Hey, girl.
Okay. Yeah. I know what you're talking about, Amanda. I remember being that person that felt like I needed somebody in my life to give me what Sarah was saying, that validation. And even I would say more so in my last relationship, I really sought that out. And then I would get a lot of the breadcrumbs, and then it would come also with like, you just want attention, you just do these things because you want attention from people. And I would get accused of being in like those MMA classes that I would take because I wanted to be like among men and be touched by men in weird ways. And so I know it might sound a little inappropriate to our audience, but those are, I think, things that like Sarah was saying, either they stonewall you or they gaslight you into believing that you're doing something for a particular reason. And I just remember wanting him to be proud of me. Like I didn't go to those classes I did it for myself, but I didn't do it for like the reasons he would accuse me of. And but I do remember for the longest time in my life wanting to feel or fill that void with somebody else. And it wasn't maybe till like 2 or 3 years after my like we broke up that I started to realize that that I have to learn how to be happy with myself and be happy alone. Because you would hear people say that, but it's like, how do you get there? Like, what does that mean? It's different for everybody. And for me, I think just starting to do more of the things that I wanted to do, that I always like held back from, and even challenging myself to do things that I was scared of, is how I started to build confidence in myself at a different level. And I started to be just more content with who I was as a person, and just feeling that empowerment of not needing somebody else to feel whole like a person. And so it is definitely, I think it's a peaceful feeling. Like I could be alone at home and be perfectly fine with that, or like pick up and go somewhere on a trip and be perfectly fine with being alone. Um, it's nice to meet other people, and you kind of are always on the lookout for the partner if it comes around, but it's not like I need to find a partner, like I need a boyfriend. Like people sometimes jump into relationships like right after they break up with one because they're trying to fill that void. Or maybe, I don't know, in Spanish we call it sacar un clavo con otro clavo, like take one person out of your life by using another person.
So what is that called? A rebound? That's white.
Yeah.
White
In
people.
English.
Yeah. What do white people call it?
It's not as fancy. What do white people call it?
It just made me think of your post. Was it yesterday? Like things white people
Oh
say.
my gosh, I was dying. And then, but the greatest part was like the next day I was like, good golly, I say all of these.
Oh, jeez.
Literally, somebody came up to me and goes, how's it going? And I go, it's going. I'm so white. I'm so white.
I feel ya.
No.
I feel ya.
It'd be like another episode should just be like things white girls say in a bad relationship.
Sometimes they say nothing. They say absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing. You don't respect me.
And I remember one of the things that was like really crucial for me, and it goes right along with what you were talking about earlier, Sarah, is learning how to identify where you are in your life and how that directly affects the people you attract as, I guess, potential partners or as partners. I remember listening to one of my favorite podcasts at the time that really helped me with healing through a lot of different things. It's called Over It and On With It.
Yeah,
with Christine
I was
Hassler.
actually talking about a
And
lot of her content just now.
I loved her. I mean, I don't listen to her as much now. I throw her on the my radio when I need like a mom when I feel like I need mom to help comfort me.
Right.
But yeah, she's the one who taught me about that, and so that definitely opened up a whole other perspective on like of trying to figure out like what kind of work I need to do on myself, if I want to attract a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's necessarily worked, but I can tell you that I haven't been in any toxic relationships. And I can easily like check off people after a date or two, and I know whether or not I want to be with that person. But it doesn't necessarily have to do with them anymore. I usually think back and think about like what I want, where I'm
Yeah.
at in life now, what my future goals are, you know, all of
Your
those
values.
things. And if it doesn't align with that, it's a hard no.
That's big. Yeah, that's really important. That's another red flag that we didn't really touch base on. I think you mentioned it a little bit, but like not having the same values. So like maybe initially there's that spark and that romance, and it's kind of like you can gloss over it. But
Hmm.
then when it comes down to it, like it's going to come out, and then it's going to be a really hard topic. So like if one of you wants kids and the other one doesn't, that's really difficult. If one of you values owning your own business and the other one thinks that's too risky, like that's going to come out,
Yeah.
you know, things that we don't really think about when we're 19 and 20 years old, but after life
Hmm.
experience, and we all now have a divorce under our belt. You learn more about who you are and what you want, and your worth, which is really cool.
Mhm. I think that that's one of the hardest things, is being the type of person who wants to own businesses and have that entrepreneur lifestyle, and be with
Yeah,
somebody who does not, value that one bit.
I
And
agree.
somebody's got to give, and
Hmm.
something will sacrifice and suffer because of it.
Hmm.
And that's not to say that the you know the differences like or anyone's wrong, or you know, or one person's right and the other person's wrong. It's just
Mhm.
going back like what you were saying earlier, Amanda, about being able to terminate relationships on good terms is like really understanding where you're going, where you are now, and if that person that's in your life at the time is going to be able to share that journey and also gain from it, and like work as partners. I remember, I think it was in 2017 in October, I went to it was a women's conference called Rise with Danette May, and I wasn't necessarily a fan of the whole event per se, but Christine Hassler was there, and I went because she was there. That's why I went. But they had a special segment where they brought on this couple who were like deeply madly in love with each other, but they identified really early on in their relationship that they just weren't going the same direction. And
Mm.
so because they didn't want the relationship to turn into something negative, they both sat down and they talked about like where they were going, where they were headed, and then they decided to end the relationship, even though they were like really deeply, madly in love with each other.
Wow.
Yeah, so I thought that was really impactful, and it took like, I don't know, I think it would take a lot from a person to be able to sit down and say, I'm so in love with you. I want you. I want you to be in my life, but like
Yeah.
you don't want the same things I want, so we can't be together.
Because that's like the polar opposite of who I am. I'm like, oh, you like dig in and you like make it work no matter what. So I think that
Mhm.
that's really powerful stuff, because I think sometimes we have that mindset, that value, that deep seated belief of like, you don't quit, you know,
Mhm.
you don't quit, and sometimes it's okay to quit. It's okay
Yeah.
to move on. It's okay to move forward. And I think what's really interesting is for me personally, I felt like deployments were a factor in my relationship. So even before I got married, deployments were a factor in my relationship. So um, I've actually always been in long distance relationships. Huh,
Mm.
never thought of that. I think that it gave me that space to grow and to find myself and to be comfortable with being alone and to have that self-love. So what was really interesting for me, and something else I think is important to bring up, is like, it's so wonderful to be alone, to love yourself, to not feel like you need to be in a relationship, but then it's also okay to move forward and get in a relationship, because that was challenging for me because I was kind of closed off. Like, I felt like I've been emotionally like numb for years now. So to open up your heart again and to be vulnerable, to like get into another relationship, and then also to kind of notice like, what are the red flags in me now? You know, because like, if we've been through something, we're probably gonna have some red flags ourselves.
Absolutely. I don't think we think about that often, and like often enough. Like, what are my toxic traits? what kind of negative stuff am I bringing into the relationship?
Yeah, because I'm like, oh god, like, what if I get abandoned again? So like, maybe I should jump ship first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, take a step back and be like, okay, you know, everything's calm. You don't have to be in fight or flight mode. Like, you know, just still love fully and open up your heart and be vulnerable. It's okay. And if you've ever been through a hardship, like a serious relationship that went south, or even, you know, a horrible abusive relationship, I can't even imagine. You know that you've been through this before and you came out okay, and you can make it out again, even if it doesn't work out, you know, I would hope. Maybe that's a strong words, but that's my philosophy. So I can't speak for everyone.
Well, we have a whole lifetime to try.
Yeah.
There's somebody for everybody, right? I don't know.
I mean, isn't Jeffrey Dahmer married? Like,
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure he has like a wife. Jeffrey Dahmer has a wife. You can get married.
I don't want to get married. I
That's
really
the thing.
don't.
You know, sorry, go ahead.
I don't ever want to get married again, ever. Like, that's my value right now. But that's my value right now.
You marry yourself.
Yeah.
Like Ariana. One time we love. No.
Oh.
Okay.
One taught me blessings. I'm so amazing.
Thank you. I'm also there. Okay.
I got you, Sarah. I got you.
I don't want to keep singing because I don't have like an angelic voice, but you know, put that out there.
Gosh, we'll make it through together. No.
Hold me down, hold me down. Well, Amanda, like, I feel like you kind of put out a bombshell there, and then you're just like, yeah, I'm cool with myself. So, come on now.
But what I like about that is that I think that it's very important for people to realize that what you feel and think now may not be what you feel and think, you know, tomorrow or 5 years down the road. Like, maybe that will change, you know, for Amanda. Who knows? You never know.
Well,
or like
about us, we can change our mind anytime we want.
Anytime. And so it's okay to feel different about different things. It's okay to differ in thought and values, even with yourself. And for people who, I guess, I don't know, I don't like to put a bad sting on marriage. Like, I still have hopes of being married in a successful relationship, but it's not something that, you know, that I'm basing my life in a future goal necessarily. It's, if it happens, it happens. Right now, I don't feel like I want to get married, but if it happens, it happens. So that's how I feel about it. But also, no, I don't know if that would hinder like like the direction of relationships in the future. Who knows?
Well, I feel like it's so important to be really in the now, no matter, you know, who we're with. You know, rather right now with us three, you know, talking together, building our relationship, and not really thinking about the future. What is the future going to be like with past the threshold. Like, you know what I mean?
1 year later.
1 year later, like, here we are. But I feel like that's like with anybody. So even dating, like, if you're on a date with somebody, just be in the moment and enjoy, you know, the moment. And if it's a crappy moment, then, you know, you don't have to have another one of those dates.
Don't go out with him
Right.
again.
Left.
For sure. I think that's another thing that I learned from Christine too. And I found that when I applied that directly with the person that I was seeing, I mean, it was a very short-term relationship, but it was a very fulfilling one for even just the short amount of time that I was with him. Just, you know, she said that whether that person is your person for the rest of your life, or whether that person is just that your person for, you know, the day or the week, be be that one for that person. And if they can't, you know, value you for that, then that's fine, you move on or whatever. But at least you were fully invested in the moment and you gave your 100%, whether you believed or not they were going to be the person you ended up with the rest of your life, but you were able to enjoy yourself to the max.
Yeah. You know, like one thing I was thinking about with you guys that I've noticed that's different from what I see with other people is like you guys aren't bitter. You know, like I feel like I meet a lot of people, guys are like, oh, my ex-wife, and like you can just tell by their tone, like they have a certain perception or an idea about them and about the relationship. And like sometimes I get it. Like there's some people that have just done some really hurtful things, but I think that's a big part of one, loving yourself, and two, finding love again is like not holding on to that resentment and like moving on from that relationship so that you can love again, whether that's yourself or just like, you know, wholeheartedly loving your friends and family or getting another relationship. So I'm curious to know, what did you guys, and it probably comes back to what you were saying before, Allie, but just more in depth, like what did you do to kind of let go of that resentment that you had from the past relationship and move forward?
It's interesting because I don't ever remember resenting my first, I guess, spouse, you'd say. And I
Really?
think that, yeah, I don't like, I remember like not wanting to be with him and like losing love for him because he just, you know, he, it was just a messed up situation. But I didn't really resent him. I resented my son's father because our situation was a lot more emotional, like abuse and mental abuse in that situation. So when I was done with that relationship, I had a horrible feeling of resentment, and I felt like I hated him. But I didn't really act on it. Like I remember praying a lot about it, but in the end, I knew that I didn't want to live a life where I was miserable because those feelings lived inside of me. So I knew that I had to let that go. And then also, he's going to be in my life for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. Um, I'm not going to take things into my hands to make things worse. So I'm lucky. I think I'm lucky in a sense that he's the type of person that's not, I don't know, I guess he's not really trying to actively hurt me, and he does well about being involved in my son's life. Um and so that for me made it easy. Like, I ultimately, what I want is my son to be happy and have love. And so if we're going to accomplish that, like, I have to learn how to forgive, not necessarily like forget, but I forgive him for all the things that happen, forgive myself for all the things that happen, and just learn how to put that in. But it's been like 6 years. I think we broke up in 2014. Yeah. It's been 6 years, and it's been a lot of, listening to material like, Christine puts out there, reading a lot of books. Like I had to read a lot of Brene Brown stuff. I had to do, listening to a lot of podcasts on relationships. I had to get to know myself more. I had to really, really do the work on learning, like, why I felt certain things, why I thought certain ways. And then one that really did it for me, and I never finished reading the book because every time I would pick it up, it would bring me to tears. It's a book by Dr. Sue Johnson, and it's called Hold Me Tight. And so it made me see things that I didn't see then when I was in the relationship, but a couple years after, like, I picked it up, and it made me see and understand things. So, like, I feel like for me, I'm a very, like, sciencey type person, so I need to know why things happen for me to be okay with them, or obviously understand them. And so when I started to understand these concepts about, like, wounds and how we react, and how, the types of relationships that we have with our parents, translate through us, and things that we do now in life, it just made so much sense, and I could forgive and move on so much easier. And I know that I don't want to be bitter or unhappy. Like, I would much rather just invest my time in my life, like,
Yeah,
being
like you're
at
only
peace. And yeah. And so I think I'm very fortunate, that we have the type of relationship that we do have now as co-parents. Him and his new spouse, it's something very rare, I think, because I don't really hear a lot of people have this type of relationship. And it might even be, like, frowned upon, like, by my culture, because I remember my parents kind of giving me, like, the frown when they're like, you get along with his new wife. I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I? She's my co-parent, she's helping raise my child. And I know I'm kind of, like, veering off, but that's maybe topic for a different day. But anyway, I really had to do a lot of internal work, and also be patient and know that it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, like, within a day or two. It's taken me years, and I'm still learning from it. So I just know that I don't want to be bitter. I don't want to be one of those girls that are holding on to dumb shit that's not going to benefit you.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I was thinking going through all the stuff that I've gone through in life is when I worked in the nursing home, there would be, some of the elderly people that were so bitter, so unhappy. And I would just think, is that going to be me if I'm, like, really mad and upset of life, like, later on in my future, and I don't remember anything. I just remember all the bitter things. Like, I don't want to be like that. I want to be like the crazy happy one that,
Mm-hmm.
just laughs. And I'm with you, Allie. Like, it's been a lot of work, for me personally, just kind of, I appreciate all of my past relationships. It took me a long time to get there, to appreciate what I went through, because I feel like I've learned so much about myself. I've learned
Mm-hmm.
what I would tolerate. I learned how I would, allow things to happen when I could have put my foot down. I could have spoke up for myself. I could have,
Mm-hmm.
done things very differently. But if I would not have gone through that, if I would not have, kept kept doing the same cycles over and over and over again, until finally I'm like, okay, I get it. I got it. I'm learning. Okay. Like, it's just one of those things for me that, moving forward, and forgiving, and having appreciation, and also looking at the good things that have come out of it, not just,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the crappy stuff that, the crying and all the emotional, nonsense that we have to go through. It's
Mm-hmm.
really a beautiful outcome that maybe we don't even know yet. Maybe we haven't experienced what we were supposed to experience later on in life because of what we've already been through. So I
Mm-hmm.
know that those relationships served me for a purpose, for a
Mm-hmm.
reason. I might not know why, but I'm thankful. And learning how to communicate with those people still, I think, is a beautiful experience as well. It's kind of a weird way to look at it, but Um, I think that we could definitely have another conversation on co-parenting as well.
Yeah, definitely.
That's important. A lot of people go through that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that you couldn't become a better version of yourself, obviously, if you don't go through the struggles. Relationships, the world revolves around relationships, and we learn the most, I guess, through not just romantic relationships, but different, types of friendships and, business or negotiation relationships. There's just that's what it's all about. And communication is a really important thing, but we're not born with a manual on how to communicate with people. And so I think that these experiences teach us how to communicate and how to put out there, what's on our head, or like what's, in our mind. They teach us how to respect ourselves a little bit more if we're willing to pay attention into, like Sarah was talking about earlier, owning up to even like your own toxic traits. Like, get to know what your toxic traits are, um, and know how you're bringing those into different relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, and work on, improving those so that you don't unintentionally harm those around you. I think that's important too. I know that in the past I like used to be.
Uh-oh, I think we lost her.
Oh no.
Yeah.
She went to the past. That's the last thing I heard.
Oh my God, did you just...
No, that's what she said. She said in the past.
We're full mom.
Disappeared.
Like, we're straight momming right now with these jokes.
Is that another thing that white people say?
What's that?
They just went to the past, like back in the future, or is that like a white person joke?
I've never have you ever heard a white person say that?
I don't know. I maybe
Are you starting a new thing?
maybe
Is this the new White Claw?
with White Claw.
Is this the new Mercury's in retro?
It's about to get weird right now because it's 1 a.m. over here on the coast for us.
Oh man.
And we lost Miss Allie.
Well.
So should we wrap it up?
I know. I think so. I think she'll understand.
Okay.
Weirdest podcast ever.
Well, this is our anniversary, right after a retrograde on a full moon, and Friday the 13th is coming up this week, so it has to be a little weird.
It's Pisces season too, and Pisces are weird.
Pisces? I think it's spicy.
Spicy.
I was thinking
Pisces
about
are spicy.
that sex orgasm, what's his name? The orgasm meditation expert that I'm interviewing this week.
Yes.
Spicy month.
Hint, hint. Just so you guys know what's coming up. Get it?
Coming up again. Well, let's wrap it up. I think we're gonna have to call it a night.
On that note.
Next time, wrap it up.